Hello everyone and welcome back to the UPSC Journey. My name is Babita, you're the Hindu Analysis Faculty at UPSC Journey. In today's session, we are going to cover the complete Hindu analysis for 25th of May 2026. And again, this session is going to be very helpful from your all upcoming exam, especially for your UPSC upcoming 2027. And as we all know, yesterday there was UPSC CSE examination and the paper was lengthy as well. It was more tricky and tough. But apart from this, let's restart again so that we can face the same kind of situation and we should be well prepared for your upcoming exam in 2027. So we'll start with the first article. And the first article is regarding China's Henan T FTP initiative. So it's Henan FTP initiative. So what is this initiative? This is a initiative launched by China that is named as Henan Free Trade Port. It's very important. Henan Trade Port. From your prelims perspective, it can be asked that what is Henan Free Trade Port? So it's initiative launched by China government to transform the island provinces into a global trade, tourism and investment hub. It's a part of Beijing border strategy to liberalize trade and attract foreign investment while competing with Hong Kong and other like Singapore. So very important its location. Location is Henan Island, southern China. It's very important. That's located in the southern China. And it was launched in 2020 by Chinese government. And its target is to have a full FTP implementation by 2025. Means by the end of 2025, they have a plan to implement this free trade port, to have a complete operational or implementation of this free trade port. How this free trade port is going to help China's economy? First, it will going to have a zero tariff on most goods. Means it will reduce the import cost of the product in the China and it will have a zero tariff on the most goods. Second, low personal income tax, like around 15% for the qualified professional. Means there will be a low income tax. Again, there will be simplified custom procedure. We all know that sometimes we see the custom procedures, we'll find it very tricky and difficult, but by this, they will going to have a simplified customs procedures which allow a faster trade flow. Again, they will going to have a visa relaxation which attract foreign talent and investors. And focus sectors are like tourism, shipping, finance, high-tech industry. So important is China's Henan Free Trade Port, and this will going to be fully implemented by 2025, located in the Henan Island, southern China. And the key focus of this initiative is tourism, shipping, finance, and high-tech industry. So very important is Henan FTP initiative by Chinese government. Next article is regarding UCC bill. UCC bill means Uniform Civil Codes bill. As we know in India, like we have a different laws for Hindus and we have different laws for Muslim, but this Uniform Civil Code bill is seeking a common law for all the citizens of the country. But as of now, why it is in news? Because Assam Legislative Assembly have drafted a UCC bill scheduled to be tabled in the Assam Legislative Assembly in May 2026. The Uniform Civil Code referred to a single set of laws governing personal matters such as marriage, divorce, adoption, inheritance, succession for all citizens of country. Because as of now we have a different laws for Hindu community as well as different laws for the Muslim community. But this Uniform Civil Code is seeking to have a single set of laws for all citizens of the country which deal with matters like marriage, divorce, adoption, inheritance, and succession for all citizens of the country. So very important that include marriage, divorce, adoption, or inheritance and succession for all citizens of the country. The concept of UCC means Uniform Civil Code is mentioned in Article 44. So like you can remember that uniform is like something same. And as we look into the Article 44, it's also same 44. So in this way, you can easily remember Uniform Civil Code, Article 44. because article itself says that there should be a single law, there should be a uniform law, and as in this article we see 4 is uniform and as again 4 is uniform. So article 44, very important, deal with uniform civil code of Indian constitution, and it's a directive principle of state policy, means these are DPSP. So uniform civil code is a DPSP, means it cannot be legally enforced by the court. So it's important that not legally enforceable rights, because these are not our fundamental rights. These are DPSP, Directive Principle of State Policy, and they cannot be legally enforced, but guiding principle for the state. But these act as a guiding principle or directive principle of state policy. Now talking about Uniform Civil Code, it mentioned in Article 44, we have already seen, and it comes under Directive Principle of State Policy, means they cannot be legally enforced by the court. These are just directive principle to the states. Their objective is to ensure or secure a uniform set of laws. So it's very important that it's trying to bring a uniform set of laws for all the citizens, irrespective of their religion, because as of now we have a different laws for different religion, but this uniform civil code is trying to bring the uniform set of civil laws for all the citizens of the country, irrespective of their religion, not enforced by court but guided by state policy. Again, this uniform civil code consists of personal laws governed by religion specific code like Hindu Marriage Act, Muslim Personal Laws Act. UCC seek to replace these with common framework, but now there's a criticism from the Muslim organization argue that UCC affect their religious freedom under Article 25 and minority rights under Article 29. So it's very important because Article 25 provide that every person has a freedom of religion, but by bringing this uniform law across the country, it will violate their religion of freedom under Article 25. And again, they have a right to the minority under Article 29 for the protection of their religion. So we know that every person have right of religion, and Article 25 say that. But if you bring this uniform civil code, that is will be a uniform set of civil laws for all citizens, irrespective of their religion. So as of now, it's seen as a contradictory with our fundamental right, because DPSP cannot prevail a fundamental rights. It's simple. Okay, again, we are talking about like uniform civil code, but the first we have seen that there are many states like Goa has implemented uniform civil code. Uttarakhand also implemented, and now Assam is also trying to implement this uniform civil code. But we have to understand this uniform civil code comes under concurrent list of the seventh schedule. So we have a three list. First, we have a union list, then we have a state list, and then we have concurrent list. So union list is where union government has power to form the legislature and on the subjects mentioned in the union list. So in this, union government has power to form the legislature, and this union list like include banking, finance. So these activities like these subjects are mentioned in this union list. Again, if we talk about like state, this include your agriculture, education, police, these come under state list. And now this uniform civil codes come under concurrent list. So that's why it allow both the central government as well as the state legislature to legislate and personal laws, and it empower to form a laws on both like both the parliament as well as state can form a laws on this matters of uniform civil code because it comes under concurrent list. And as of now, okay, so this is need to be a correction here. This is 100. This is we have a 61 laws, and in this we have a 51. So first of all, you talk about like concurrent list. So there's an entry number 5, which deals with marriage, divorce, infant and minors, adoption, wills, succession, joint family, and partition, all matter in respect of which parties in judicial proceeding were immediately before the consummation of the constitution subject to their personal laws. Means these all are things which are under Uniform Civil Code. Again, UCC fall under the entry, hence Assam Assembly can introduce the bill because it's part of concurrent list. So both Parliament as well as state legislature have power to introduce the bill. Again, if we talk about like Law Commission of India, there was the 21st Law Commission around in 2016 to 2018, which studied UCC in detail. First, 21st Law Commission studied UCC in detail and concluded in 2018 that neither a necessary nor a desirable at this stage, means uniform civil codes are neither necessary nor desirable at this stage in 2018, but and recommended that in personal laws instead of single laws, means we need to have a reform in personal laws instead of this single codes. But again, we have 22nd Law Commission in 2020 to 2023, which again reopened this consultation on UCC and issued a public notice on June 2023 inviting viewers from citizens, religious bodies and the stakeholders. In 2023, it invited different point of views from citizens, religious bodies and stakeholders and submitted a report to the government in 2023 with suggesting gradual reforms and harmonization of personal laws. Somebody at allow to have a uniform civil code, but at a very gradual level, and then it to be reformed, which is harmonizing with personal laws. That should not be contradictory with personal law. So it should be framed in a such a way that UCC should not be against with the fundamental rights. Okay, again, we have to remember this key judicial pronouncements on UCC. First, we have to remember the case in 2014 where Shabnam Hasmi case linked the Juvenile Justice Act of UCC, emphasizing the need for secular laws. So in this Shabnam Hasmi cases, where it emphasized the need to be have a secular laws. And again in 2017, very famous Saira Banu case, which addressed triple talaq, because accordingly to Muslim personal law, it should be addressed under Muslim personal law. But under the Saira Banu case, which addressed triple talaq, reinitiate the UCC debate, but separating it from the issue of human rights. Okay, the next article is again very important and it's continuously in news. That is about 124A of sedition. And now the Supreme Court have concern that need to look over this colonial law in the country did not want. So why it is new? Because a three-judge bench led by CGI Suryakant clarifying that court can proceed with sedition trials appeals if accused has no objection. Because as of now, under this section 24A, proceedings that had been frozen since May 2022, means as of now in Supreme Court in 2022 had given judgment where they had been frozen the proceedings under this Sedition Act of Section 124A, but now Supreme Court clarified that court can proceed with the sedition trials appeals if accused has no objection, means the person who are already accused under this act or already accused under this Section 124A, then the proceeding can be started or the trial can be initiated if accused has no objection. When the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita (BNS) took effect in 2024 Parliament effectively, it replaced Section 124A of sedition with Section 152. So very important that previously this IPC section 124A is now replaced with Section 152 and increase the minimum sentence to the 7 years. Like in IPC Section 124A, there was a provision of 3 years imprisonment. But now the minimum sentence is increased to the 7 years, and the word it was a sedition by new name, because in this new BNS the word sedition is nowhere mentioned, but it has like other format introduced, and it replaces section 124A with section 152 and also increase the minimum sentence to up to 7 years. Very important. So section 152 of BNS was introduced, and it include offenses like endangering acts which is endangering sovereignty, integrity and unity of the country. So these all offenses, which is directly or indirectly linked with sovereignty, integrity, and the unity of the country, a person can be treated under this BNS section of 152. Again, the scope is bit increased. It includes secession, armed rebellion, and subversive activities, encouraging separatism. As if anyone is doing anything which is against the integrity of the country, then a trial can be initiated. And again, the punishment is increased up to 7 years of life imprisonment. Means there can be minimum sentence of 7 years and can be of life imprisonment. The terminology means the word sedition is omitted, but the essence retained in broader constitutional language. Means the word sedition is not mentioned in this BNS section of 152, but again it increased the broader constitutional essence of this section 152, or we can say IPC section of 124A. Section 124A IPC was introduced in 1860, which defines sedition as an act of bringing hatredism or contempt against the government established by the law. Means it was introduced in 1960 during the colonial period, where sedition was defined as a, so very important that what sedition actually is. Sedition is means bringing hatredism or contempt against the government established by law. And in this IPC section of 124A, there was a life imprisonment or up to 3 years of sentence or fine, or can be both. So now this 3 years is increased to 7 years. But again, because if any individual or any government, any professional or any organization, if it's criticizing the government policies, means it doesn't mean it come under sedition, because we have a fundamental right, that is 19 clause A, sub clause A, that talk about freedom of speech and expression. So we have a full freedom of speech and expression. Again, that's not a absolute. We have a reasonable restriction on this freedom of speech and expression. Section 19, Article 19, subclause 2 allow reasonable restriction on the interest of sovereignty. Means government can provide a reasonable restrictions if anything is in interest of sovereignty, integrity, and security of the state. If something which is disturbing the public order, decency, morality, and contempt of court, the defamation and incitement of offense. So means in this all cases, government can provide a reasonable restriction or can impose a restriction on freedom of speech and expression. Sedition law 124A IPC often challenged as an exceeding reasonable restriction and curbing dissent. Because if the government is applying the sedition section of 124A, it directly curbing the freedom of speech and expression. So this is about very important how this is replaced with the BNS 152 section. And again, what are the offenses? Cessation, armed rebellion. So these things, like four terms, are very important. The cessation can be the armed rebellion and subversive activities. So these are activities under which a person can be tried under section 152 of BNS. And the word sedition is omitted in this BNS section of 152. Again, it's contradictory or it in a clash with freedom of speech and expression, because we have a freedom of expression to criticize the government, and it should not be linked with this sedition, or with a person should not be charged under Article 124 of IPC section 1860. Okay. Now the next article is regarding India's green transition still run on coal. Means this is showing that we are still heavily depend on coal rather than having a green transition. So why is new? Because since 2017, renewables have consistently accounted for the largest share of new power capacity addition in the country. India is rapidly expanding its renewable energy capacity. Like till March 2026, we have 42.4% of installed capacity, which is coming from the renewable source of energy, which was only 0.72% in 2005. So we are expanding from 0.72% to 42.4% till March 2026. Despite this, means we have have expanded our capacity to the 42%, but still we are heavily depend on coal remains the dominant in electricity generation. Means we have a renewable energy capacity of 42%, but still we are heavily depend on the coal for the electricity generation. So this shows that there's a gap between only building a capacity and a generational gap. Means we have a capacity, but we are not able to meet that generational gaps because we are not having alignment with the full capacity. We have only 42% of we have a renewable installed capacity, but we are not using it to a full extent because we are heavily dependent on coal for the electricity generation. Again, the rising coal energy prices in the West Asia because of this West Asia conflict wars exposes India's vulnerability due to depend on imported crude oils and LPG. Because we have installed capacity of 42%, but still we are heavily import dependent for our crude oils or for LPG, especially from the Qatar. So this war or this war situation has exposed India's vulnerability. Means we are still into the condition where we are most prone to the external shocks because we have only installed capacity of 42%, but still we are not using it to the full potential. And again, this show that there is a gap in capacity and generational gap in Indian energy transition. If we look about like actual figure, because here we are saying that we have an installed capacity of 42%. But if we look into the actual figures, the actual figure generation in April 2026 is 15.8% comes from a renewable energy, but 71.8% still comes from or still coming from, we can say, from coal. So means still we have a capacity of 42%, but we are generating only 15.8% from the renewable source of energy, and still coal again is heavily dependent for electricity generation. Means for electric generation, we have still 71% electric generation is coming from the coal. Now this show that we are still heavily dependent for the import of oil. Talk about like union list into 54. It talk about mines, minerals and development. Means coal, oil and natural gases comes under union list. Important. So it should be remembered that mines, minerals, development and which is about like coal, oil and natural gas comes under union list. And again, in concurrent list, entry 38, which deal with electricity generation and distribution and transmission, means the mines and minerals developments come under union list, they come under union. But electricity generation and the distribution and transmission of that electricity comes under concurrent list, means both central government and state legislature can form a law on that. If we like compare with China oil and gas only 4% of power mixer, means they have shifted toward EV hybrid models, and now half of new car sales reduced oil demand by greater than 1 million barrel day, means they have shifted toward EV or hybrid models. But if we look about India, transition is real. 42% installed capacity, renewable capacity we have, but still we are incomplete and we have only 15.8% generational share in April 2000. Means we have a gap because we have installed capacity of 42.4%, but still we are at 15.8% in real terms. And Article 39B talks about that should be equitable distribution of resources, and Article 48 talks about protection and improvement of environment. So it can be linked with your environment also, and equitable distribution of resources, again very important. Now we need to look out that what are the structural reason for the India is lagging behind, having instead of having 42% capacity, we are at 15.8%. So what are the structural gaps? First, we have intermittency of renewables. Solar and wind outputs totally depend on weather and time of day. So it's a one reason of this gap. Second, electricity demand, however, is continue and round the clock because of this rapid industrialization. There's a continue increase in demand of this electricity. So again, this is a challenging situation. And again, there's an absence of large scale storage. Means at the daytime when we have enough or abundant solar energy, but at the same time we don't have a ample or sufficient large-scale storage capacity. India lack in sufficient battery storage, pumped hydro and hydrogen infrastructure. Means we don't have that kind of sufficient infrastructure to store that produce electricity. Without balancing the capacity, coal continue to provide the base load reliably because we don't have that infrastructure. So we are continue to rely on the coal, and that's need to stabilize the grid, and we also need to have a grid stabilization. If we talk about like grid and market limitation, we have a flexible grids, modern transition and market mechanism for integrated or renewable use are underdeveloped. Means we don't have a flexible grid system, we don't have a modern transmission system, and because of all this loopholes, we are still underdeveloped in terms of India's green transition, and still we are running on the coal, or major share is coming from the coal. Okay, next article is regarding the US and Russia oil waiver impacting for the India, because we have seen that in USA has in Russia's oil waiver, and now it's going to most tighten the this import, and now because of this import tariff increase, they will be going to have a shift of energy in the whole world, and how India is going to be fight against this, and how India is going to be more vulnerable in this kind of situation. So why it is news? Because US sanctions, the United States has ended waivers and tightened the restriction on the Russian oil export, part of the ongoing sanction battle over Ukraine war. And because of this restriction on Russian oil export, they're going to be have a global energy system stress. Simultaneously, geopolitical shocks will risk prolonged inflation, because if there will be a more restriction on oil export, there will be a more inflation. Then there will be supply insecurity and instability across Asia region. So these are going to be the consequences of this restriction on Russian oil export. Second, the Balance Act is becoming increasingly fragile. The latest restriction come at a sensitive moment. The oil markets are already unstable or unsettled by the conflict in Russia or in West Asia. Persistent disruption in market trade routes and ongoing concern over the Strait of Hormuz and the world's most crucial oil transit are choke point. That because of this ongoing tension of or conflicts over Strait of Hormuz, and because this is one of the crucial point or choke point for the maritime trade. So again, this is going to be a very large impact on the economies. Because of this, there will be going to have a maritime trade disruption. Persistent shipping route issues increase cost of uncertainty, because if there will be a disruption in maritime trade, definitely there's going to be increase in cost and vulnerability and uncertainty. Strait of Hormuz concern is again the critical choke point for the global oil transit. Any disruption threatens supply chain. India's vulnerability. We are heavily dependent on import of crude oil, 90% for our needs. So again, we are heavily import dependent, and because of this sanction, India is most vulnerable to that. Energy shock transmissions. First, if there will be like higher crude prices, so how is it going to transmit to the other side? Because if there will be a higher crude prices, the costlier will be import. And if the costlier will be import, there will be a inflation, and again there will be a more pressure on rupee, and there will be a continued depreciation of rupee. So these all things are interlinked. Like if there will be a high crude prices, the imports are going to be very costlier. At the same time, inflation, and there will going to be have a more pressure on Indian rupee. If there will be a disruption in Strait of Hormuz, then this disruption will going to create a supply uncertainty. And if there will be a supply uncertainty, this will going to increase in LPG and fuel prices. If there will be a shipping insurance surge, means if there will be increase in shipping insurance, the higher landed crude cost. Because of this higher insurance cost, there will be going to have a higher crude cost, and the refining margin pressure, again that's going to pressurize the refining sector. Russian crude restriction, reduce supply flexibility and higher sourcing cost, because if there will be a restriction on the imports, and then there will be a reduce in supply flexibility, And if there will be a freight disruption, then there will be a delay in cargoes and ultimately inventory and stock management will be in stress. So these are points showing that how these changes will going to impact the economies. Okay, here we see that higher crude oil prices, costlier, then there will be inflation and rupee pressure. We all seen Strait of Hormuz disruption, then there will be supply uncertainty and LPG and fuel logistics. Again, there we have a shipping insurance surge, then there will be higher landed crude cost and there will be having more refining margin pressure on the refining sector. Russian crude restriction, reduced supply flexibility and higher sources cost. Freight disruption means delay in cargoes. Then there will be a more shock to the inventory and stock management sectors. So this is about all today's session. I hope you like the session. Let's do a recap again what we have studied in today's session. First, we have studied about Henan FTP initiative. Very important. That's an initiative started by China. And in this, China is going to have a free trade port where in the Henan Island of southern China, and it's going to have a fully implemented by 2025. Again, it's very important. It's going to provide very liberal points like zero tariffs, low personal income tax, simplified custom procedure, visa relaxation. At the same time, they're going to be more focused on tourism, shipping, finance, and high-tech industries. After that, we have seen the UCC bill, and now this conflict of UCC bill with freedom of religious article under 25. And then we have seen that's Uniform Civil Code Article 44, which say that there should be a uniform set of laws for all citizens of the country, irrespective of their religion. Again, this UCC code means Uniform Civil Codes are not enforceable by the court. So these come under DPSPs, Directive Principle of State Policy, and they cannot be challenged or by enforced by court. After that, we have seen the matters included in the concurrent list because UCC comes under concurrent list, means both state and legislation both have power to form the laws. Marriage, divorce, infant, minors, adoption, will, succession, joint family, all these matters comes under UCC. After that, we have seen 21st Law Commission, which say that there's neither need, not desirable at this stage, but at 22nd Law Commission said that they need to be have a gradual reforms and harmonization of personal laws. After that, we have seen this judgmental on UCC, judicial judgments on UCC. So in 2014, we have Shabnam Hasmi case, and in 2017, we have Saira Bano case of which address triple talaq. After that, we have seen sedition under Section 124A of Sedition Act, and how this is replaced with BNS section of 152, and how this has increased a life imprisonment or up to 7 years or minimum up to 7 years or life imprisonment. What sedition is omitted? Section 124 of IPC 1960, and it was formed during the British rule, and now it is replaced with BNS section 152. Very important. It curbing of freedom of speech and expression, and it allowing government to have a reasonable restriction on the freedom of speech and expression. After that, we have seen that India's green transition, but how India is having a 42% installed capacity, but still it's only having 15.8% share coming from the renewable energy. But still we are heavily dependent on coal. That is around 71% is singly coming from the coal. After that, we have seen the structural reason or structural causes because of absence of large scale storage. We have a grid and market limitations. After that, we have seen that how this US sanction on Russian oil is going to be impact the economies, and is this going to impact like maritime Strait of Hormuz concern, and India has most vulnerability because we are importing 90% for our needs. At the same time, how this energy shock is transmitting from one point to another point means if there will be higher prices, then they are going to have inflation and rupee pressure. If there will be disruption Strait of Hormuz, it will going to have an uncertainty of supply, and accordingly going to have a stress on fuel and logistics. Similarly, we have seen a disruption, freight disruption, then there will be delayed cargoes, and inventory and stock management stress will be there. Again, we have seen this. So this is about today's session. Thank you so much, everyone.